that Jonathan had, but now we're starting to see people who are really kind of making a choice about which direction to forge ahead in, and kind of formalizing all of that interactivity, which for me is hugely interesting to kind of see people say, this works for this reason, and kind of come up with a grammar and a sort of guidelines for that sort of thing, which film and pros have.
Those reasons are pretty much always wrong, though. It's seriously, it's all rationalization to fit, things that we would like to believe, as opposed to like a deep understanding of what's really going on. So like, I'm allergic to words like ludology and stuff like that, because I just feel like most of what comes out of that sphere is not actually representative of reality. It's just like a construct that some people who want to be all academic about things build in order to feel like they understand something, but I feel like they fail to get in at what's really inside there. So.
Do you think it's useful as a starting point, though?
No, actually no, because
wow.
Yeah.
And as a game academic, I actually agree. So.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So what would be boiling games down? I mean, in interior design, a lot of people, or design in general, there's the chair, which is one of the most fundamental design concepts. It's a solid structure, has to bear weight, so you've got materials science in it. You want it to look attractive, you want it to look interesting. And almost all designers at some point try to design a chair. And obviously in Scandinavia they do some quite dramatic interpretations of chairness. But a lot of what would be the most fundamental aspect of game, boiling game down into something like that can be then iterated on and played with?
Are you asking both of us?
I'm asking both of you.
Okay. You go first.
Well, because I've had no sleep, I don't have exactly the right analogy in my head that I'm trying to, it's like in there somewhere, but, so you picked a mechanical object as an example, right? You could pick a more complicated, instead of like a chair, which is a very basic element, you could say, hey, like a game is a Model T Ford, right? And it has all these pieces to them, and that's a little more complicated, because maybe none of them is like the fundamental component. But you can look at all the pieces and pretty much understand what they do and what their role is and how they all form together and build this machine, right? I think that's what ludologists try to do, right? They look at games as being like a Model T Ford or something. But, what if a game is not that, but it's like a lake? What's the fundamental component of a lake, right? Or what if it's, I don't know, like a bird or something,
I understand
right?
that, but I mean, most games you can boil down to a card game.
Oh, I disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah. Like what, Counter-Strike is a card game?
Well, then Braid certainly could be.
Oh, no.
That was a bad choice, Robert. That was a bad.
We've got to fight. Well, yeah. Structure. No,
it might be in the sense that
you wouldn't get all
in the sense that you could build a Turing machine out of cards, and you could run the software on a Turing machine. Yes, but that's all that I'm willing to give you.
Fair enough.
I'm confused by that as well, actually.
Yeah, well, the idea is that I mean it may be a complex set of registers that have to be stored, but you can. When you're moving a character around on screen, you can change in the state of the character. Can be a set of cards.
Okay, so you're talking about the reduction of a game to basically just being state and the rules that influence that state.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I should point out that I also disagree with that. I think it's a useful starting point, but I think that's all it should be. I don't think you should ever kind of constrain, like Jonathan said, you should never constrain a game just by that.
No, I completely agree. It's more of a tool to try to work out where are we innovating from, was I guess the question.
I have to invoke the Chinese room in that one. Do you have any philosophy students in the area? Right? So when you say it could be boiled down into a card game, right? Even like a simple game like Pac-Man Championship Edition, right, would be a crazily complicated card game with like so many cards that the experience of playing with it, it's very difficult for us to understand how that relates to the actual game. Like, yes, I could play that card game, but it wouldn't be the game anymore, right? It would be so far, like the Chinese room is this thing where if you distribute the process, if natural language processing is possible, and you write a program that understands Chinese, you can distribute the understanding such that it's unclear exactly. I don't want to try to argue this right now.
I mean,
this is a total tangent, right? The point is, there's some distance that is a distance too far.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Average, yeah.
So
I mean, it's like taking a book as just words or a story as just structure. It's not. It's about the whole thing. It's the gestalt of it, rather than just the mechanics that make it up.
Yeah.
Like a story is not just sentences, and a game is not just mechanics.
Like you said, there's only certain formal things you can do with a book. Like you can't put another spine, on the back of it. There's certain things you can't change about the formal properties. But within that, there are still undiscovered literatures for thousands of years, and new letters and things like that. There's still like all those potentials. And I think the card game analogy, you might still be playing with cards, but perhaps some people just make a house out of cards, or
absolutely
paint a wall.
That's part of where I was going with it. Is that can it be distilled down? It's definitely a useful design tool at some points of in a number of different types of games, to be able to distill down one section of your game down into a simple paper-based system, and then play that through and see if that's going to be fun, and before you actually then go out and try to code it and make it work. Or to get rid of all of the graphics and just be able to focus on this particular aspect of the gameplay. But is there anything is there any unifying principle that we're actually innovating from? Or actually, as I suspect, is it not a unified space in the way that the blob looked, but actually a number of discrete spaces, such as another fundamental concept is a ball. And there's an awful lot of games based around a ball. And that most of those can't be simulated by cards, but they can be very elegantly simulated by a ball.
You mean a real ball or
a real
ball?
ball?
I'm confused.
Yeah. I mean, FIFA is an obvious example. It's based around kicking a ball around. And a number of other titles have come out over the years that are based around just moving the ball. They're not sports simulations.
I think you have to kind of think about what makes those things a game, because a ball by itself is not a game, and cards by themselves are not a game. Like it's only when you kind of impose some sort of rules, and even if you watch children play, what they do is they evolve the rules, but you have to kind of have some framework, and then you have some way of interacting with that framework, and that's when it becomes a game. And that's kind of something vague and reductionist, but I think that's a good starting point. It's just a bunch of rules. It comes back to what I think Jonathan was saying earlier about how these mechanics have a truth to them. Like, A plus B as the kind of the basic thing. Once you start to construct those mechanics, it becomes the truth of the game and the rules of the game. And if you have rules that interact, you get this kind of emergent thing, which is kind of the Pac-Man thing. It's that, and from that emergence comes the experience of the game. He says, being very pretentious.
I've got a rant, that I've used a couple of times, but it's that chalk is a computer game, or more precisely, it's a programming language, and it runs on any platform, and you can make any type of game with it. It's been used for thousands of years. You use chalk outline to draw the netball court or the basketball court. You use it to draw hopscotch, and it's a technology, and only when it's used with rules in mind, and there's a kind of an outlay of kind of an idea of fairness, do you get a game kind of laid out. Basically, these things have been going on for so long. You only the idea is that you have an agreement between the players, or in the modern era, you have an agreement between the player and the maker, that there's a contract with fairness, and then you have a kind of situation which kind of evolves. I guess the other thing before we move on to the questions, I'm kind of really interested, because you all kind of mentioned taking ideas from the real world, or the idea of finding mechanics or ideas from your real life experience. Do you guys see computer game ideas everywhere, or is it something that you kind of have to create your own space for, or do you work when you walk down the street? Yeah.
Well, so something, I don't actually know if this made it into my talk this morning, but I do all these prototypes, and I put them away when I'm kind of done